Hello and welcome to Into the Black Archive. This is episode 4 of the Doctor Who podcast, where myself and a very firm friend try to get through every Doctor Who episode, starting from 1963 all the way to the present day. My name's James Stevenson, and the person you hear unable to keep their laughter in check is Owen Cranston. Owen, what are you laughing about this time?
Wait, this is our fourth attempt of recording this. I don't know why, I just keep laughing. We've been attempting to record this now. We've been recording for 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's mainly tangentialising, but this laughter thing is crazy. It's coming out of nowhere.
Anyway, I've sorted. I've finished. I can contain myself now.
You feel calm?
I think so. I think I can do this.
Okay, well, if you think you can do this, why don't you tell the lovely listeners at home what episode we've got to and what it's about?
So we are now beyond the halfway point of what remains of season 1. We're on episode 4, The Keys of Marinus. So as we mentioned last episode, we are not going to be watching Marco Polo because it doesn't exist and we don't really want to do it without getting full experience. So if an animated version of it does come out while we're producing this podcast, we'll probably come back and watch it there.
But until then, we're sticking with the stuff that we've still got left. So, Owen, do we want to do our synopsis challenge again? Or could you even get this into 60 seconds? It's a lot.
Before we do that, I want to discuss something else.
Yes?
I want to discuss Big Finish, because I've recently gotten into Big Finish.
You have gotten into Big Finish. I've never really done a deep dive into them, to be honest.
So I did it many years ago without realising what Big Finish was. I had a few. I didn't like them. But I've just recently discovered there's a load of the 8 Doctor stuff on Spotify. So I've just been listening to them. And I really like them. I'm really into the 8th Doctor.
I have heard very good things about it.
For first Dalek story, it starts off with a Dalek story and it's very good. It's very good. I'm loving it.
Didn't they do... I'm trying to think, was it around the time where they did the Dalek story that ended up becoming Dalek? Because I know that was a Big Finish production originally that Robert Shearman wrote.
No, it's oddly a lot more similar to the most recent New Year's one, where we have two opposing Daleks.
The one where they're... Yeah.
You have 2 opposing Daleks. Essentially what basis is... person on a planet starts making their own Daleks, the other Daleks comes along and find them, and then they go to war.
Oh, yeah, because of the whole, well, you're impure Daleks.
Yeah. So it's essentially the same sort of thing which happened there, but it's really good. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, Big Finish have been producing great stuff now for years. I've just never gotten too into them. Do you know what I mean, when you always say, oh, I'd love to do Big Finish, or I'd love to do a deep dive, and then time just slips away from you because you're busy.
It's not even just time. They cost a lot.
And
I just
never... the cost isn't great.
I can never justify spending £25 on a Big Finish thing.
Like, if it's Tennant, you can start justifying it, but even so, it's a lot of money to spend.
I might justify it because Eccleston's coming out with a new series relatively shortly, so I might justify it for him.
I'm considering that.
Which is very tempting, because I think he did need more seasons.
I've been desperate for more Chris. I've always liked that he had a short arc in some ways, but at the same time, you could always use more Chris Eccleston as Doctor Who. He's so underrated as a Doctor, just because of how short his tenure was. Yeah,
I think it's because they didn't know whether it was going to be renewed, so they had to try to put as many good things as they can into that one series, and for the most part, they achieved that. And I'm going to ignore farting aliens here.
Yeah, apart from the "ooh, I'm shaking my booty" line from Aliens of London, there are some odd attempts at childish humour from Davies in that.
Yeah.
I'll let it slide because he was trying to make a family show, but I won't let it slide again. Thank God he just does adult stuff now. It's a Sin is stupidly good. If you haven't watched that,
I haven't yet. I need to. It's on my things to watch.
Just on the highest level of drama we're producing in the country at the moment. He is right up there with the best.
Anyway, back on the episode. So we were talking about synopsis.
Yeah, the Keys of Marinus. What on earth happens in this, Owen? Because it's a lot.
Essentially, it's one of the first travelling stories, because it becomes a more common thing later on with the chase and the really long Dalek one, which we're sadly not going to be able to cover. But essentially, it's a wild goose chase. So the TARDIS turns up on a mysterious ocean island. The ocean is made of acid, and they go inside this massive. They get trapped inside this massive pyramid, which is being staked out by some guys, which can best be described as thick wetsuits. They find themselves introduced to an old man called Arbitan, who is forcing the Doctor and his companions out on a wild goose chase to find some keys. They go to 4 different places where they run into different troubles every step of the way. Finally, they come back, but can they save Arbitan from the wetsuit men?
From the wetsuit men. It's a properly old school caper, this one, and it feels a lot like the kind of. I'm trying to think of the exact word now for this, but you know the kind of Flash Gordon style romps where you'd go to multiple planets and have multiple things and you'd always be falling into some kind of different trap, and this is definitely that.
Yeah, I really liked it, honestly. This is the episode which I liked the most out of everything we've covered so far.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you. I think this is the one where actually Doctor Who really starts to see its potential, because the Dalek one is solid. It's a solid one, and it's great because the Daleks are so realised early on. But this is almost like a whole series packed into one in some ways.
Yeah, I know you disagree with me on this, but I liked how it was paced. I think the ending was a bit too short. They essentially come back from the last place, and then it ends. Essentially, we don't really know what happens. I think that could have been a bit more extended out, but I think it's. The fact that it was one story per episode, 5-minute episode, it meant there wasn't as much time for waiting around, which we've seen a lot, even with, say, Dalek and Unearthly Child. There's just a lot of waiting.
Yeah, there is. The story moves really quickly. I mean, I don't want to say, like, straight up that I think the pacing is bad because it is fast. It doesn't mean that it's bad. I think there are some points where you can't really pause for breath, and so characters are doing very quick development that isn't totally believable, and you're kind of having to let the jumps happen. In terms of, though, the one episode story structure that Nation does, Terry Nation wrote this, same guy who did Daleks. He's pretty good. The structure's great, and in terms of that, the pacing's wonderful, because you can see all these different ideas per episode coming in, and they build on each other, so that it creates this really rich story with so much going on.
And it really does keep you entertained, keep you gripped, which I don't think the other ones did.
Yeah, there's a lot of lulls in, say, Daleks and Edge of Destruction, which neither of us really liked, just never quite gets you.
Yeah. But shall we talk about characters, or shall we just go straight into it?
I think we can talk a little bit about the characters, because I think there's a lot of, with it being such a big story, I think there's a lot of chance for development with them.
Yeah. So who do you want to start off with?
Do you know what I want to start with? I know this is a point in plot points. It's right at the bottom, but we can kind of talk about it now, which is Ian motherfucking Chesterton is a legend.
Mm-hmm.
He's fab in this. He is properly good.
What do you mean by that?
Well, is that he's properly good?
Yeah.
I mean, in the sense of he is a very well-defined character now.
Mm-hmm.
He is completely willing to stand up for himself and the people around him. He's heroic in ways and has a great deal of intelligence. I mean, yeah, towards the end, he's a little bit damsel in distress, but because he's done so much good work in the earlier episodes, like, for example, the winter one, he's superb in.
I'm fairly convinced, I don't know for sure, I'm fairly convinced William Hartnell took a holiday during episodes 3 and 4 of this. So Ian Chesterton essentially takes over role of the Doctor, making sure everyone's safe.
And you know what? He wouldn't do a bad job at it.
No, he didn't do a bad job at it. He did in the cold place abandon Barbara with a slightly murderous man, but we can ignore that, but we can come back onto that bit later.
Well, you know, he trusted him at the time. Sometimes you make these errors. Can't be perfect. But I think Ian's very well realised as a character now, and is definitely the star of the show, if not for William, obviously.
And did you not feel the same way for, say, Susan and Barbara?
Do you know what? I actually think Susan took a step back. Barbara got forwards. I'll start with the good stuff. So Barbara went a little bit forwards because she has good moments in this. I like to say that Barbara's role in the team is to be the empathy.
Yeah, I think also she starts to try to go her own way, especially in episode 3, where she decides she's going to ignore what the men said and march on ahead. Well, it turned out to be very dangerous. She probably shouldn't have done that, but she still decided to, and it progressed the story
in
along.
the second story as well, which is the one where they go to the town where you get everything you want, but it's all a ruse.
Yeah,
she gets a lot to do, and she does that very well as well. Like, she's initially fooled, but when she realises that things are wrong, she does great in those scenes. I think Barbara's great, and to be honest, I wanted to chat about this. Her jumper is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal jumper. I'd love a jumper like that. Like that little, there's a little roll neck on it, but it's not too high. It's just, it's chic, it's timeless. Barbara, we love you. You're an icon.
Timeless children.
Don't bring that up in front of me.
So I think what we were just saying with Doctor, he didn't really have that much character development here because he basically wasn't around for a good chunk of it.
Yeah, the Doctor comes in when it's needed. Because, as you said, it seems like Hartnell went and took a holiday for a couple of episodes.
Which works, I think, here. How they did it worked. Yeah,
I think the story works it around really well, and the Doctor is able to go and do his own thing off screen. Then we go back, we get a quick catch up of what's been happening, and then he goes off and gets to do Doctor things, and it works well. I think all the characters, with the exception of Susan a little bit, are very well handled, including the new characters.
Yeah. So shall we go on to the different plots then, which happen?
Yeah, try and dive through all of it.
So I think I'm first of all going to. Here's a question for you: is there much in episode 1 you want to discuss?
Episode 1 just kind of feels like the setup, doesn't it?
Yeah,
we can go through it quite quickly.
It's pretty much what I said in the synopsis. They end up on what looks like a tropical island. The water's made out of acid. They find a pyramid. They get trapped in there. They find Arbatan, who sends them on a quest to find the keys. Yeah,
it's very much a setup. But there is one thing I do want to bring up out of this, although it does come up in 3. You know the bit when Susan gets taken from, like, there's the revolving bit in the wall that sort of goes around and takes her around the other side. That is hilarious. To watch. They're just being pulled back on this revolving wall. It really got me. I had to replay it a couple times before I could move on. I was gone watching that. And also when the Vord, when Ian and Arthur are attacked by the Vord and they fall into this seemingly endless pit.
That's
just
actually so
screaming.
That's one of a few notes I've got on episode 1. And this is a full quote from what I wrote down. Visual effect when the suited guy Ian fights fall through the trapdoor is bloody amazingly bad.
It is so bad. It is absolutely brilliant. It is. I encourage you all, if you don't have BritBox, go get the free trial of BritBox. Go and click on episode 1 of the Keys of Marius. About 15 minutes in, if you see that, you have seen every bad monster movie ever rolled into one.
The worst thing is, it isn't even needed. They could have just shown him falling through a trapdoor.
But no, they went for the full effect. And I admire that they did. It's bad, but it works. I think it still works. But yeah, that's episode 1. We don't have to go too much into that because it's just the setup of you need to find these keys which are in different locations.
Yeah. So do you want to go into talk about episode 2 synopsis and we can talk more about that?
Yeah, straight in. Do you know what? This shows you how well prepared I am for these podcasts. I haven't got the notes up for what the episode titles are. I can remember some of them. So there was The Sea of Death is the first one.
The second one is called The Velvet Web.
Yeah, that's why. It's kind of poncy title. It doesn't really describe the story as much as The Sea of Death does. But yeah, in The Velvet Web, essentially what happens is the characters travel for the first time to a different place using something called a...
Travel dial.
Travel dial. So I was going to call it time dial for a second. I was like, no, they don't do time travel. And they end up in a village or a culture where they seemingly get everything they desire. And they arrive and Barbara is lavished out in this gorgeous dress, eating grapes. And they give him pretty much everything they want. But it turns out it's all a ruse. Yeah,
so their brain has been controlled to make it seem like you're in a luxury place by essentially a bunch of brains.
Nothing
like
else. A consciousness. is controlling things.
For Morpho, or I think it's called Morphon.
Yeah, the Morphon, I think.
They're like brains with eye stalks. It's quite amusing.
What I did find funny about the way Morphon is done, or is destroyed, is Morphon's presented as some kind of higher being throughout that has a lot of power, can control this town. You know, he ends up basically mentally enslaving Ian at one point to almost choke Barbara to death. But the way that he's killed is just with a bit of a hammer. Anyone could have done that. Come on, it's not that big.
So what I wrote down in my notes is that it very much reminds me of a game from, I think, like 2016 called We Happy Few.
I haven't played it, but
essentially the entire plot is Germans invaded Britain during World War II, and they essentially drugged everyone with a pill called Joy, which made everything around them see perfect, rainbows, amazing. But as soon as that joy wears off, you see it's rats, covered in rats, it's covered in sewage, it's horrible. Oh. And it just reminded me so much of that, because that's essentially what happens here. They get brought in, they don't get even drugs, they kind of like get their brain waves adapted to see everything is amazing, everything is silky, when in fact, as soon as that effect wears off, it's disgusting.
Yeah, and there is exactly that. They're kind of in this mental, psychological game, and you're not sure what you're seeing is real. And characters get enslaved. And one of them, who is called... Is it Altos or Arta? It is Altos. Is enslaved at the start, but ends up actually accompanying the team as we move on through the search.
So does Sabinov.
Yes, who is Arbatan's daughter.
Yes, so these two people were sent through... with the time double, they were previously sent through people who got brainwashed by the Morphons and essentially became their slaves.
Yeah, but after the Doctor and co. free them, they decide to split up, which is the reason why Hartnell isn't in episodes 3 and 4.
I liked episode 2, episode 3 even, but I don't remember much of what happened.
So this is the Screaming Jungle, which not a great deal does happen. Essentially, Susan starts hearing these really loud whispers, effectively, which sounds like an oxymoron when I say it like that, but they're essentially these whispering noises that are very pervasive.
Which are supposed to be like piercingly painful.
Yeah, at least that's how they go for it. It's hard to do it on a set that costs about £3, but they try. Barbara decides to move ahead of the group and gets caught in a trap where they meet a sort of biologist.
Ah, yes.
Who knows some information about the keys.
For scientists who've essentially made a massive laid his entire area full of traps to try to, one, stop people coming in, and we later find out there's something a bit odd about this forest they're in. It's not just that it screams.
What's happened, and this is a really cool idea that would have been great for even a modern Who story, is that a growth accelerator has been used in some way on this bit of jungle. And because of that, the jungle moves much faster than nature usually would.
Hasn't this all essentially been used on a modern Doctor Who? Because I can't remember what Doctor it was. I think when they turned the entire Earth into a massive forest. Oh
no, I do remember the one with the massive forest. Now I think about it. I think it was early Capaldi.
Yeah.
I know Clara was there.
I don't remember it getting very good reviews. I don't think it got very good reviews.
Yes, that's right. It was in the forest of the night. They're not threatening trees, though. They're nice trees, it turns out. I just had a look back through.
And just for the audience, James didn't just remember that. He spent around 3 minutes researching it. I've just cut it all out. He is not that good at remembering.
Owen, we need to have a conversation about when you shut up.
Well, let's be honest here. This entire podcast has just been a showcase of how bad I am at remembering words.
Yeah, no, that did take me a good 3 minutes. Complete slip from my head. Maybe it's because the episode's not that good.
Yeah.
It's done much better in this, Keys and Marius.
I actually really liked how, as you were saying, I feel like all of these stories, excluding the overarching story, could have been done really well in Modern Who.
Yeah, they're all really decent ideas. And they're just like little parts of this one serial. They all could work on their own.
Potentially with the exception of the snowy one, which is episode 4.
I actually disagree with you there, because I think you could do a lot with that. It would just be more character-based, and you could play on the whole thriller aspect, rather than the vassal give himself away so quickly. But we'll move on to 4 in a minute, I'm sure.
Yeah. I just don't really remember that much happening in 4.
4 is more, I think, a psychological game in a lot of ways, which is fine, because if you do that, you don't actually have to have a lot happen. It's more about the doubt when things aren't happening. Yeah. Actually, should we move on to 4? Because we've covered 3 quite a bit. So after the jungle incident, Ian and Barbara use their travel dials to get out of the situation, and they arrive in a snowy tundra.
Yes, where they all fall asleep because it was so cold. However, we then cut... Because Atios went ahead of them at this point here, so they weren't with them. That's actually something we should mention about episode 3. So initially, when they found a key, which they thought was a real key, so to be fair, and Atios and I think Susan went on ahead.
Yeah, Atios and Susan went on ahead.
With Sabina and Ian Chesterton and Barbara stayed ahead, realised it was a fake key, and then went through season 3. So they get separated.
Yeah, and so in 4, they arrive in the same tundra, fall asleep in the cold. But then, as you've written down here, Ian, after they're rescued by this guy Vassal, is allowed to go out and find Altos, who's been bound and is out in the snow with no trousers.
Because Altos' entire costume, for some reason, has no trousers.
And that's no problem. We have no problem with a confident man. But it's a lot.
And when the plot doesn't line up, we will pick it apart.
This is what we do. This is definitely what I do.
Yeah. So, it was a good episode, but I don't feel like there was that much there.
Not a heap. It's one of the weaker parts, but I do like the stuff with Vassal once we start to realise that he's got nefarious purposes and how that's done. I think they could have maybe held that a little longer and kept up the nice act for maybe 5 more minutes. Yeah. Just to add some doubt into the mix, because he kind of gives himself away quickly.
I think, however, that's more to do with the runtime of the episode, because I don't think they could have fitted in all the stuff post him coming out of being evil if they did it any later within 25 minutes.
Yeah, they are confined by the runtime, but for what it is in 25 minutes, it's still a very strong, nice hook episode.
Yeah. So they find the key in a block of ice surrounded by demons, which were never actually described what they were.
They're just kind of things.
It's just a kind of common theme throughout this. As much as I do like this serial, there's a lot of unexplained things.
They're just like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. This is happening now. Yeah. Enjoy them dying.
Yeah.
Doesn't one of them run straight off a building?
Right off the ledge and
right off the ledge.
Yeah, so they removed a rope bridge. Yeah.
It's a funny effect again. If you like people falling over, please do check out the Keys of Marinus.
If you think of the typical terrible sci-fi scream, that is what is done.
Every single time.
Yes.
It's a wonderful, wonderful piece of work.
Yeah. So they
think of like old school 60s Hollywood. Sorry, I was tangenting there.
Oh, no worries. So they find the key in a block of ice, where they then all 4 of them, 5 of them I can count.
Yeah, it's 5.
Use the travel dial to go to the final stop-off place, where Ian Chesterton is accused of murder.
Comes out of nowhere. You think that you've been through the ringer on genres. You've had a kind of thriller thing with the jungle, which is a bit action-based. You've had a slightly psychological thing in the snow. And then you end up in this courtroom drama out of absolutely nowhere because Ian's framed.
Yes, framed. And this comes back onto what I was saying before about how nothing's really explained. I don't know why what was going on, why they framed him or anything.
It seemed that they wanted to steal the key from its location in order to potentially have power over the machine, because that's the whole point of the keys. You have all the keys, you control this amazing mind machine.
But how are they going to get the other 5? The other 4?
That's a start, isn't it? I think the idea was they weren't even thinking about Ian at the time. He was just there, so they used him.
Yeah, but the idea of them getting the key, in my eyes, doesn't make much sense.
It's not... You don't see what the motivation to get the key is other than, ooh, that's a powerful key.
Yeah, that's it. That's all. That's the only context we're given is, oh, that's powerful.
Anyway, though, we do get a very interesting thing about justice, because I actually think there's a lot of themes going on in Keys of Marinus, mainly about justice. And
yeah,
the idea is that Ian is basically guilty until he's proven innocent because of the accusations of the Guardians, which are the kind of police interrogation force here, are so trusted that in order to go against it, you need proof.
Yeah, because a guy even confesses to stealing the card, and they still go, no, Ian Chesterton is still guilty.
Yeah, because they view that he still could have put him up to it, and that is considered essentially law, because these people are meant to be law makers.
It's taken from what we have, which is innocent till proven guilty. You've got to be absolutely sure this guy's guilty, to more sort of like a civil court where you've got the moral side of possibility.
Yeah, and what eventually happens is it's very difficult to find. They have to find positive proof, which proves more and more difficult as they search for it. All the while, they're still trying to find that last key. And
also, at the end of the courtroom thing, so I think that we might be merging the last two episodes together because they're essentially one story, so that might end up happening. 5
and 6 are kind of one.
Yeah, so they go down the murder mystery, essentially, trying to work out who committed the actual murder, where the doctor is playing sort of an investigator/lawyer. And then here in the courtroom, and Susan gets kidnapped.
Happens a lot.
Yeah.
That does happen a lot. Susan just gets kidnapped and screams. There's not a lot for her to do.
Yeah, that is actually true. It does feel like a lot in these stories they're struggling to find things for Susan to do. Which I suppose comes back into what we've previously discussed about the modern Doctor Who time team. They struggle with 3 companions because there's just not much for them to do.
I mean, it's not so much that they struggle with 3 companions, is that they struggle with 3 shills that are meant to be characters, but just haven't been written like them. If they were written like characters, it'd be a lot better.
Am I going to have to cut her out more of you ranting about New Who?
No, I'm not ranting about New Who. I'm just bringing that up because I genuinely think that this set of 3 companions works a lot better because they are stronger characters.
I think you're right in that sense, but I also feel they are just struggling to find things for Susan to do.
They are struggling with Susan. She's not as defined as the other 2 and doesn't have as much agency, which doesn't help.
We could be missing that out from Marco Polo, though, because that could equally have happened in that story.
That is true, and we don't have the context for that.
And then what else happens in the courtroom drama?
Well, a lot of mad stuff happens in that courtroom drama. Namely, a man dies.
Oh yes, the guy who I said who basically stood up and went, I took the key, or something along those lines. I murdered him, and then he dies because of a massive conspiracy.
Yeah, a whole cover up, and he dies right in the middle of the courtroom. Basically, it's just a flash, and he just straight up dies. How he dies? Who knows? I think
we're led to believe he got shot by one of their guns.
Yeah, it's not well sold if it is a shot. I'll tell you that.
It goes into more of what we were saying. None of it, you just expected to go with it. None of it's explained to you.
Yeah, you're just like, don't worry about how he died. The twat's dead now. Just accept
how he died
this.
Or why he's died. He just is.
And then Susan is kidnapped by this kind of shadowy organisation that's doing this cover-up.
By his wife.
Yeah, which turns out to be his wife. And she's done this whole act of being hurt about her husband's death. Really, this is all her plot.
Within the conspiracy, they get the key. We're never really told why they've got this conspiracy around the key.
It's just they do.
Yeah.
Deal with it. And they go in and get it all sorted.
From what we discussed about this episode, from what I'm thinking, I don't like it.
It's got like the elements you want.
Yeah,
out
it's
of
like
a courtroom thing, but they don't come together well.
It's impactful, but then as soon as you start thinking about it, there's not much meat to it.
Yeah, it's very superficial, and it doesn't really work as a narrative. But there's good bits.
Brings us on to the end of the courtroom drama where Ian is found not guilty, but then then we then go back to from our main starting off point where we see Arpatan's died.
Oh yeah, that comes out of nowhere.
Well, he died at the beginning of the first episode, didn't he? And the VAR attempt to trick Ian into giving him the key, the final key.
But Ian tricks them with the fake key that they've still kept from episode 3.
Did you get that twist? How did you notice think that twist was coming up? Because I did.
Yeah, I noticed. It was
Cool.
It was nicely done. Actually,
Yeah.
It was quite nicely done. But the rest of the ending does fall a bit flat, doesn't it?
Yeah, actually, I think that twist would have worked when you think about how this would have been broadcasted. Because that he got that key 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think it would really work back in the broadcast. I agree, because obviously we'll have binged these.
Yeah, so the audience would have completely forgotten what has happened previously.
Yeah, it's a nice of course moment, which is how a great twist works.
Yeah.
I do think as a set of episodes, it is by and large really well done.
Yeah, I think it hits the right points, but it misses the context around those points.
Yeah, it's very superficial.
Yeah.
And just goes, oh, this is nice, isn't it? Great. Well, don't think about it too much because, boom, here's another thing you need to be worried about, which is cool. But there's not so much depth there. Perhaps that's one thing where it lacks.
Yeah, because this entire thing where they find Arpatan's dead and all that stuff happens in around the last 5 minutes. They leave they realise all this stuff and they just take Artos and Sabina away from the pyramids because the pyramid gets exploded.
Yeah.
And then the doctor just kind of goes, there you go live. And we comes out there going,
yeah,
this doesn't feel like a good ending here.
Well, they get a kind of love arc, which I think is their way of going, well, they're in love, aren't they? So it doesn't matter if they're dead. I
really liked them as companions. I wish we had them more.
Yeah, I thought Altos in particular was really fun. He's very much, I know they're trying to sell him as like an alien being, but he is just a 60s public school boy. He reminded me of the guy from Family of Blood and Human Nature. I can't remember his name, like Blaine or something like that.
Yeah, I wish we had more of them. I wish they were around for more series, but obviously they already have a full TARDIS. They can't go adding more people to it.
Yeah, imagine a 6-person TARDIS. I mean, Russell did it for 1 or 2 episodes, and that was a lot.
Yeah, I think there becomes a limit of how many people you can have.
You can't balance out that many characters. I mean, the TARDIS is big enough, but the script certainly isn't. I wouldn't want to write it.
No. So, I think we're at the end then, aren't we, really, of this?
Yeah, we've basically made it. We've
managed to make it way through. So, I think we do what we normally do at the end of these. Out of 10. Out of 10.
How about you start, Owen? How about you start?
I don't know. I started thinking it would be a 9. Yeah. But I think by the end of it, I'm going to give it around an 8.
See, I was going to give it an 8. I think it's pretty much slap bang an 8.
I was thinking about this earlier, though. These pointers we're giving things. These are going to have to massively change when we start actually getting things. Because when we start getting into like New Who and things which are really high energy, which we really like, these 8s and 9s we're giving are going to look terrible.
No, actually, I disagree. I think this genuinely is quite good. There are moments where it isn't, but by and large, I think it's a really good story, and it gets us closer to kind of what makes Doctor Who really great. There are a lot of New Who stories, I think, to be honest. So, there will be low scores there, and there will be very high scores there as well.
But
there'll be a nice
if you're
balance.
thinking about it, though, you're giving this one here an 8, but what are you going to give Genesis for Dalek?
Oh,
is this
only hard?
Is this only 2 points higher than Genesis for Dalek?
Look, we don't have to worry about that until we get there. is my view on this.
Yeah, there's a good chance we don't get there, so we can just ignore that.
Yeah, we might never have to consider it. But if you would consider giving us a follow or sharing our podcast, we might be more motivated to get there.
And subscribe.
Absolutely, especially on YouTube, where apparently we're doing much better than other places.
Yeah, I don't quite know why, because it's purely an audio experience.
Sometimes things go like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we've made the end.
Yeah, so remember to follow us on Twitter at Black Archive Pod. You can email us at blackarchivepod@gmail.com.
And also, because some of you may know me for this, this is the first episode of the podcast we're recording after the release of The Long Drive.
Of course you have to self-promote on here.
It's really, we're not far off from the release. It's been about 3 days when we're recording this. The Long Drive is a 2-hour audio thing that I directed and wrote and edited, which, if you can find it on my Twitter...
If James reminds me too when I upload this, I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, it'll be somewhere. I personally think it's really good fun. It's very unique. You probably haven't heard anything like it before. It's got some great actors involved. If you've got 2 hours spare, it'll be worth your time.
So, thank you very much for listening. I suppose we better get our travel dials ready and travel off to the next episode.
Which is?
The Aztecs.
The Aztecs.
Yes.
We should go back to the Aztec period very quickly, although these dials don't work in time.
We can ignore that. They're now time dials.
Oh, are they now? They're now time dials.
We have innovated over for years.
Aren't time dials just vortex manipulators?
Yes, but they're the traditional ones. So let's go. Let's go.
All right.
Well, thank you for making it to the end of this episode of In the Black Archive. If you enjoyed what you listened to, please remember to subscribe.